Hi, I'm James from Chaosium. I sat down with Lynne Hardy, who is an associate editor for Call of Cthulhu and the line editor of the Rivers of London role playing game. We talked about mysteries. It can be a little hard to write a mystery for a game, especially if you don't have much material to draw from. But in this video, Lynne shares some great advice about how to create your own mysteries from scratch and also how you can adjust some details of your mystery on the fly if you need to. I'll jump across to the interview in just a moment, but first, please remember to subscribe, and thanks for watching.
It is really tricky, and I think that's one of the reasons why Call of Cthulhu scenario supplements sell really well because in a lot of other games they don't. People get the source books. They, as you say, they don't really need that support. But writing a good mystery is tricky, or it certainly can be tricky. And it's why people like Agatha Christie made, quite a decent fortune out of writing them for people. Um, so yes, I mean the key thing is that it you need to make sure that it has a beginning, a middle, and an end, which sounds a bit daft in some respects, but you need to have that hook that gets you into the story. You need to have the middle, which is finding the clues, and then you need to have the end, which is the satisfying conclusion that those clues have actually led to. Um, because there's no point having, if you don't have that good bit in the middle to support it, you're not going to get a satisfying conclusion. And that doesn't necessarily mean going down the whole Hercule Poirot gathering everybody in a room thing. It just means that you figure out what the mystery is, or at least most of it. I mean, it might just be the tip of the iceberg. It might be something that leads you further down the path, but you have to have a satisfying conclusion that makes it feel like the players and the investigators have actually achieved something, even if it's only temporarily.
So when we talk about the mystery genre, there are all these different tropes we can pull on. You talked about the Poirot example, but when the mystery has so much to it. When we are creating one of these stories, what are the elements of a mystery that we really have to have designed? You mentioned the beginning, middle, and end, but does that mean that do you have to have a twist? Does a mystery have to be internally solid? Can it be an afterthought? What's the hard rules that you tend to stick to?
Um, if you're running a mystery game, then your mystery can't be an afterthought. It has to be the core of your plot. Otherwise, it's probably going to come unstuck. The main thing that you have to have is that clear through route. Means, motive, opportunity, if you want to go for what, the trifecta, as the Americans call it. There's various other things, who, what, why, where, when, and how. What is the mystery? Where did it take place? When did it happen? Who was involved? How did they do it? These are all things that you need to think about because then when you know that, you can start creating clues for your investigators to find.
I've found sometimes when I'm creating a mystery, I can get really bogged down in details. I find myself fleshing out this massive backstory, and it can get quite difficult to involve players, or it feels like a lot of it doesn't apply to players. How do you counter some of that?
It's a problem. I mean, I love doing my research. I like making sure things are historically as accurate as you can be in a game that has dirty great monsters from outside space and time. But the thing that you have to remember is you need to have a certain level of background knowledge so that you can sell it to your players. That may mean that they never see it, but don't get hung up on it. This is still a game. It's still supposed to be enjoyable. Um, Nobody enjoys reading 96 pages of background for each clue, basically. As long as you know what you're doing as the GM, and then you can be the filter. You can give them the cliff notes of the important stuff that's really important because any background that you provide should be, it should help the story move forward. It should give the investigators something to get their teeth into to help them solve that mystery, whatever it might be.
So, if I'm building my first mystery, which I'm sure is a situation that a lot of people find themselves in, that maybe they've done some smaller ones before, but this is the first big central mystery of a game or a campaign or whatever. What are some early pieces of advice that you might have? Is there like a set number of clues that you'd recommend? Is there any guidelines that we can use?
Oh, that's a really how long is a piece of string question. It depends on how many sessions you're really thinking of running this over, because obviously pacing is going to be massively different between a one-shot, one-session scenario and a campaign. Obviously, if you've got a campaign, you want to provide maybe a couple of chunky clues per session that will slowly build so that the information towards the last few sessions starts to come thick and fast. But obviously, if you're just running one session, you need to be bam, 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 bam in there, just to hit them repeatedly round the head with the information. I suppose one of the key things as well is that you need to know what your clues are, but you also need to be flexible in placing them. I mean, a novel, you have complete control over where the characters go and what they do and who they speak to and what they find. In a game, you don't, because we have player agency, which is fantastic because it can take you down all sorts of interesting routes. But it does mean that the GM's role is that little bit tougher because you never quite know where the players are going to send their characters. So you have to be prepared to shift things round to make sure that they stumble across these clues wherever they go. Now, obviously, if it's an item and you originally had it in the Lord of the Manor's safe, you can move it to the servants' quarters. You can stick it in the glove compartment of an automobile. If it's a person and that person gets killed by the evil cultists, you can make sure that maybe they find a journal that person's happened to left lying around. Or, just before they died, they were concerned. So they told their best friend about it, and their best friend comes to see the investigators to say, oh, such and such was really worried, and he asked me to pass this message on to you if anything should happen to him. So, just always be prepared to move things. And if it's a really, really important clue, don't hide it behind a firewall of dice rolling. Dice rolling should get them extra interesting information that helps develop and enrich the plot. But if it's an absolutely crucial clue, they should get it. And that's not just they walk into a room and you tell them the clue is there. They have to do something to get it, but it doesn't necessarily involve them rolling dice.
How do you differentiate between something that is a really important clue and something that the players might have picked up on but isn't really one? I love those moments when you're running a mystery and you get your players theory crafting and everyone's really engaged. But one of the worst feelings is when you go, ooh, that's not part of it, and I really don't want you to run away with this because I can see the sparks going off and it's almost disappointing that you're going to head off in that direction.
Well, I mean, sometimes that direction is actually better than the one that you've written, and it wouldn't be the first time that I've actually gone, well, it wasn't, but it is now. And, if you're flexible about your clue placements and they've not gone too far off track, you can actually do that because they're telling you what they're interested in. Obviously, if they really are about to disappear off in completely the opposite direction, the joy of Call of Cthulhu is you can always give them an intelligence roll. And go, so, you've been having a think about this. Give me an intelligence. Oh, no. I mean, yes, that does seem attractive. But actually, now you think about it, you're fairly certain that's actually a red herring. And that's going to lead you away from the truth.
That bridges perfectly to something that I sort of feel personally, and maybe it's a completely just a me thing. Sometimes with red herrings and with mysteries that, oh, that sounds better, it's that now, I feel like it can be kind of dishonest a little bit. I feel like it obviously I know that you want to run the best session possible, and sometimes you just want to change things up to make people engaged, but I feel like to maintain the stakes at the table and to create that sense of faith between you and the other players, it's important to not do that too much. Do you disagree?
I think you're right. You can't do it too much, because if you do it too much, that's when the danger of your plot falling apart and not making any sense is going to happen because you've changed too many things. But it can be good fun. I mean, going back to Christie, someone a few years ago wrote a really good analysis of how her novels are structured. And this is a good thing to think about when you're writing plots. I mean, Agatha Christie made a fortune out of writing mysteries. She is, widely read, widely regarded as one of the greatest authors ever. I think she's the second most published person, or she sold the most books after the Bible kind of thing. And there's a reason for that. It's because she wrote clear, interesting plots that people could get engaged in. She had 7 main plots that she tended to reuse elements of it over and over again. I'm plucking 7 out of the air. It always feels like there's about 7. But in terms of structure, we're talking A, the main plot. That is the actual whodunit. There has been a crime, there is a victim, there are a bunch of clues. Poirot, Miss Marple, whoever that's the one they're there to solve. Then you have the B plot, which is the distraction plot. Here is a person that it looks like it could be. This is your red herring. And that will lead you on a slightly interesting dance, and it will get you interesting information, but it will ultimately still lead back to that main A plot. And then, of course, you've got the C plot, which is usually there's a romance in there somewhere. She was a bit of a softie at heart. Quite often, the murderer will actually end up to be someone that another one of the characters has fallen for. So you've got melodramatic heartbreak in there too. Now, that isn't necessarily something that everybody wants in their tabletop role-playing games, but if you do, it can add an extra interesting element.
Let's turn things back to some practical advice for people who are running stories then. What if you're running a mystery, you find yourself in the middle of a game, and you find a plot hole? You realize there's an issue. What are some tips for on-the-fly damage control you can do?
Never be afraid to say, hang on, I've just realised something. Would everybody like a comfort break? I just need 5 minutes to think. There's nothing wrong in saying that. If you're feeling really gutsy, you can just keep going and hope they don't notice. We've all been there. We've all done it. But yes, never be afraid to say, oh, now I just need to have a little bit of a think and a recalibrate just to see how what you've done is going to affect what I had written.
Let me ask you this. What do you think, if you look back at the Call of Cthulhu scenarios, campaigns you've written, what is the best mystery you think you've created?
Oh, that's like asking me to pick between my children. That's evil. I will always have a fondness for Scritch Scratch, partly because of the situation under which he was created, but also because the very first session of it was amazing because it was a really good character piece. And that's another interesting thing with mysteries as well, is that you can really go for the role playing aspect of it, getting into character and using those characters to not just solve the mystery, but to create that entertaining story. A lot of really good mysteries are character driven, so never forget that when you're dealing with your mysteries.